Walking away from someone who doesn't value you is one of the most powerful decisions you can make. It's not an act of anger or revenge, it's an act of self-preservation. When you choose to go no contact, you're making a bold statement your well-being matters more than their opinion, validation, or acknowledgement. It's a choice to step out of a cycle that may have drained you emotionally, mentally, and even physically. It's about reclaiming your power and taking ownership of your life in a way that perhaps you've never done before. This decision isn't easy, though. It requires strength, clarity, and the willingness to let go of what's comfortable, even when that comfort is causing harm. Many people underestimate the courage it takes to walk away. There's a fear of being misunderstood, of being seen as cold or uncaring. You might even worry that by cutting ties, you're somehow betraying the relationship you once shared. But here's the truth: staying in a situation where you are undervalued or disrespected is the real betrayal of yourself. It's allowing someone else's behavior to dictate your worth, and that's not a burden you were ever meant to carry. Going no contact is not an act of weakness, it's a declaration of strength. It's saying, I deserve more than this, and I won't settle for less. The beauty of this choice is that it's not about them, it's about you. For too long, you may have tried to fix the relationship, pouring your energy into making things work. You may have stayed up late replaying conversations, questioning what you could have done differently, or blaming yourself for their actions. But walking away shifts the narrative. It's no longer about what you could have done, it's about what you will do moving forward. It's about creating space for healing, for growth, and for the peace you've been craving. No contact isn't about punishing the other person, it's about protecting yourself. It's about recognizing that you can't control how someone treats you, but you can control how you respond. This process is transformative. At first, it might feel like a loss. After all, letting go means saying goodbye to the version of the future you envisioned with that person. It's normal to feel grief, even for a relationship that caused pain. But as you distance yourself, you begin to see things more clearly. You realize how much of yourself you compromised to maintain the connection. You notice the energy you spent trying to be understood by someone who wasn't willing to meet you halfway. That clarity is a gift, because it allows you to reclaim the parts of yourself that were lost. When you go no contact, you're teaching yourself an invaluable lesson: you are enough. Your value doesn't come from their approval or acknowledgement. It comes from within. You don't need to beg for respect or chase after someone who can't see your worth. By walking away, you affirm that your time, your energy, and your love are too precious to be wasted on someone who doesn't appreciate them. This is a powerful shift in mindset, one that liberates you from the cycle of seeking external validation. Instead, you start to focus on building a relationship with yourself, learning to trust your instincts and honor your needs. This journey is not without its challenges. There will be moments when doubt creeps in, when you wonder if you made the right choice. The silence can feel deafening, and the temptation to reach out may be strong. But remember, this silence is where your healing begins. It's in these moments of quiet that you reconnect with yourself, free from the noise of their influence. You start to hear your own voice again, the voice that's been drowned out by the demands and expectations of others. This is where you find your strength, where you realize that being alone is not the same as being lonely. It's an opportunity to rediscover who you are and what you truly want. Walking away also sends a clear message to the other person, whether they acknowledge it or not. It tells them that their behavior has consequences, that you won't tolerate disrespect or mistreatment. It's a boundary, firm and unyielding, that protects your peace and demands accountability. But the most important part of this message isn't what it says to them, it's what it says to you. It says that you value yourself enough to walk away from what doesn't serve you. It says that you are willing to choose yourself, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when it means letting go of someone you care about. Walking away is an act of self-love. It's a commitment to your growth and well-being. It's choosing to prioritize your happiness over someone else's comfort. It's recognizing that you deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that drain you. And most importantly, it's a reminder that you have the power to create the life you want, one decision at a time. By going no contact, you're not just walking away from them, you're walking toward the best version of yourself. And that's a journey worth taking. When someone first experiences no contact, their initial reaction is shock. They don't expect it because up until this point, they've always believed they had access to you. They've taken your responses, your time, and your energy for granted, assuming that no matter what, you'd always be there. When that access is suddenly gone, it feels like a rug has been pulled out from under them. The silence hits them hard because they didn't see it coming, or maybe they didn't believe you were capable of following through. This shock is not just about the absence of communication, it's the realization that they no longer hold the influence they once did. Their mind races. They might check their phone obsessively, expecting a text or a call from you, something that proves you're still tethered to them in some way. It's human nature to believe that patterns don't just stop, especially when those patterns have benefited them. You see, they've grown comfortable with the idea that you're the one who keeps the connection alive. They've leaned on your willingness to reach out, to mend fences, to keep things from falling apart. So, when you don't, it creates a cognitive dissonance. They can't reconcile the reality of your silence with the comfort of the role you've played in their life. In this state of shock, their first instinct is often denial. Denial is a defense mechanism, a way to shield themselves from the truth they aren't ready to face. They tell themselves that this silence is temporary, that you're just trying to make a point, and that soon enough you'll come back. They convince themselves that you're bluffing, that you're still invested in the relationship, and that you just need time to cool off. They might even downplay your decision, dismissing it as an overreaction. This denial gives them a false sense of control, allowing them to believe that the dynamic hasn't shifted as drastically as it has. Denial can manifest in different ways. Some will go about their day pretending everything is normal, refusing to acknowledge the growing distance between you. They might even act indifferent, telling themselves and others that your silence doesn't bother them. But this is a facade, a mask they wear to avoid confronting the deeper feelings of uncertainty and insecurity that your absence has triggered. Denial isn't about you, it's about them not wanting to face their own emotions or admit their role in the breakdown of the connection. At this stage, they might also rationalize your silence. They'll think, oh, they're just busy, or they're probably waiting for me to reach out first. They'll create excuses to justify why you haven't contacted them, clinging to any explanation that keeps them from having to accept the truth. These rationalizations are their way of maintaining the illusion that they're still in control, that this situation is still within their grasp. But deep down, the uncertainty begins to creep in. As the days go by and the silence stretches longer, the shock starts to wear off, and reality begins to set in. They start to realize that this isn't just a momentary lapse in communication, it's a deliberate choice on your part. This realization can be jarring because it forces them to confront the fact that they no longer have the access to you that they once did. It's a wake-up call, one that shakes the foundation of how they've perceived their relationship. They begin to see that their assumptions about your availability and willingness to engage were misguided. This stage can also bring with it a sense of entitlement. They might think, how dare they cut me off like this? Or I deserve an explanation. This entitlement is a reflection of their inability to fully grasp the boundary you've set. They've grown so accustomed to your presence that they feel owed, as though your time and energy were theirs by default. This entitlement can fuel their denial, making it even harder for them to accept the reality of your decision. Denial is often the longest stage because it allows them to avoid the discomfort of introspection. Admitting that you've chosen to step away means acknowledging that they played a role in pushing you to that point. It means facing the possibility that their actions or lack thereof led to this silence. For many, that's a difficult pill to swallow. It's easier to cling to denial, to tell themselves that this is just a phase, than to confront the deeper truths about the relationship and their behavior within it. But here's the thing, no contact isn't about them. It's about you reclaiming your peace and protecting your energy. While they're caught in shock and denial, you're creating the space you need to heal and grow. Their struggle to accept your absence is a reflection of how much they depended on your presence, whether they realized it or not. The shock and denial they experience are not your responsibility to manage or resolve. These emotions are theirs to process, just as your decision to go no contact is yours to uphold. The shock and denial they experience during no contact are part of their journey, not yours. It's a moment where they're forced to confront the reality of your absence and what it means for them. For you, it's a moment of empowerment, a reminder that your peace and self-worth are worth more than their temporary discomfort. In the silence, they may begin to understand the gravity of what they've lost, but that understanding is not the goal. The goal is for you to move forward, free from the weight of their expectations and the cycle of dependence they created. When someone begins to feel the weight of no contact, the initial shock gradually gives way to frustration. This frustration stems from their growing realization that the dynamic has changed and they no longer have the access to you they once did. It's not just about missing your presence, it's about feeling the loss of control they thought they had over the situation. For a long time, they likely operated under the assumption that you would always be there to bridge the gap, to fix the issues, or to maintain the connection no matter what. Now, with that pattern disrupted, they're forced to face the absence of the comfort and reliability you provided. Frustration is fueled by the realization that they no longer have the same influence over you. They may send a message or try to initiate contact, only to be met with silence. Each unanswered attempt chips away at their confidence, leaving them questioning why things aren't unfolding the way they're used to. They feel powerless, and that powerlessness can quickly turn into irritation or even anger. Their ego might start whispering, "Why aren't they responding?" Or "How dare they ignore me?" This stage reveals a lot about their mindset and the way they valued or undervalued your presence in their life. At the core of this frustration is an internal conflict. During the stage, they begin reflecting. On one hand, they may try to convince themselves that your silence reflection is often triggered by the frustration itself, unaffected, and that they can move on with questions, though not all of them. But on the other hand, your absence speaks louder than words. They might think, "Why are they doing this to me?" It forces them to sit with their own thoughts, their own feelings, and the emptiness created by your decision to step away. As their initial instinct, this inner turmoil can be unsettling for someone who has relied on you, rather than something that fills certain gaps in their life, whether those gaps were emotional. It's easier to blame you for creating distance than to examine the ways in which they contributed to the breakdown of the relationship. As the silence continues and their frustration builds, deeper reflections begin to emerge. They might replay past interactions, searching for clues or answers. They may start to see moments where they dismissed your feelings, overlooked your needs, or took your efforts for granted. This stage can be uncomfortable for them because it forces a confrontation with the truth that your silence is not about pettiness or spite, but about self-preservation. You didn't go no contact to hurt them, you did it to protect yourself and create space for your own healing. This realization can be humbling, though not everyone is ready to embrace it fully. Frustration also serves as a mirror, reflecting back their own behavior in ways they can't ignore. When they're met with silence, they're left to confront the gaps in communication they may have once dismissed. The frustration they feel now is likely the same frustration you felt when your concerns were overlooked, when your boundaries were disrespected, or when your efforts were met with indifference. This stage holds up a mirror to their actions, and for some, this reflection becomes a turning point. They begin to see the connection from your perspective and start to grasp the impact of their behavior. For others, however, frustration can lead to defensiveness. Instead of using this stage as an opportunity for growth, they may double down on their ego, convincing themselves that your silence is unjustified or unwarranted. They might tell themselves that you're being unreasonable or dramatic, using this narrative as a way to avoid accountability. This defensiveness is a shield, a way to protect themselves from the discomfort of admitting they were wrong. But whether they choose growth or resistance, the frustration they feel is a sign that your silence is having an impact. It's disrupting the cycle they had come to rely on. In the midst of their frustration, they may attempt to regain control. This could look like reaching out with messages, trying to provoke a reaction, or testing your boundaries to see if they still hold. These attempts are not just about reestablishing contact, they're about reasserting their influence. When these efforts fail, as they often do during no contact, the frustration deepens. They're left with the stark realization that they no longer have the ability to dictate the terms of the relationship. This loss of control is difficult for anyone to accept, but it's particularly challenging for someone who has grown accustomed to being in the driver's seat. What they may not realize is that this stage of frustration is as much about them as it is about you. It's a moment of reckoning, an opportunity for them to confront their own patterns and choices. For you, this stage serves as a reminder of why no contact was necessary. Their frustration is not your responsibility to fix or manage. It's a reflection of the boundaries you've set and the self-respect you've chosen to uphold. While they grapple with their emotions, you're free to focus on your own growth, knowing that this process, though challenging, is ultimately a step toward peace and clarity. As the silence of no contact lingers, a new stage begins to unfold, an overwhelming sense of longing. This is not just a simple desire to reconnect, it's a deep, gnawing feeling that strikes at their core. They begin to feel the weight of your absence more acutely, and it's no longer something they can brush off or ignore. The longing isn't just about missing the physical presence of someone, it's about missing what you represented in their life, the comfort, the support, and the sense of connection that they may have taken for granted. This longing often catches them off guard. It creeps in during quiet moments when there's no distraction to mask it. They might find themselves replaying old conversations, hearing your voice in their mind, or reminiscing about shared experiences. Suddenly, the memories they once overlooked or undervalued become vivid. They begin to realize the extent of what they've lost. It's not just your words or actions they miss, it's the emotional safety you provided, the way you made them feel seen, valued, and understood. The longing becomes a mirror reflecting their unmet needs and unresolved emotions. They start to recognize the void your absence has created, and it forces them to confront the reality of the connection they had with you. For some, this longing is tied to guilt. They realize they may have taken advantage of your kindness, overlooked your needs, or failed to appreciate the effort you put into the relationship. For others, the longing comes from a place of regret, a wish that they had done things differently or valued you more when they had the chance. The intensity of this longing can be surprising even to them. They might have convinced themselves earlier that they could move on easily, that your silence wouldn't affect them. But as time goes on, the silence doesn't just remain, it deepens, and with it, the awareness of your absence grows stronger. They begin to see the ways in which you added value to their life, the roles you played that they never truly acknowledged. This isn't just about missing companionship, it's about missing you, specifically, because no one else can fill the space you left behind in the same way. This stage can be emotionally overwhelming for them. The longing can manifest in small, seemingly insignificant moments, hearing a song that reminds them of you, passing by a place you once visited together, or stumbling across something you gave them. Each of these triggers reignites the feeling of loss, making it harder for them to escape the emotions they've been trying to suppress. It's during these moments that the reality of no contact truly sets in. They're faced with the undeniable truth that they can no longer reach out to you as they once did. The longing often drives them to question what could have been done differently. They may replay scenarios in their head, thinking about arguments, misunderstandings, or missed opportunities to show appreciation. They might wonder what would have happened if they had treated you differently, if they had communicated better, or if they had respected your boundaries. This type of reflection can be painful because it forces them to confront their own shortcomings. It's no longer just about what you've done or said, it's about what they failed to do. Sometimes this longing pushes them to act. They might try to reach out, hoping for a response, or they might craft messages they never send, pouring their emotions into words that will never reach you. The act of reaching out is their way of trying to bridge the gap, to fill the silence that has grown between you. But when those attempts go unanswered, the longing only deepens, reminding them of the boundaries you've set and the changes you've made. For some, this longing becomes a turning point. It forces them to take a hard look at their behavior, their choices, and the ways in which they may have contributed to the situation. They start to see that the relationship they're longing for isn't something they can regain through quick fixes or empty words. It requires genuine growth, effort, and accountability. This realization can be humbling, and for those willing to do the work, it can lead to personal transformation. However, not everyone is willing or able to take this step, and for those individuals, the longing remains a source of unresolved pain. On the other hand, there are those who use this longing as fuel for their ego. Instead of acknowledging the deeper emotions driving their feelings, they may frame their longing as a need to win you back or regain control. They might view the silence as a challenge, a game to be won, rather than an opportunity for introspection. This perspective often leads to empty gestures or manipulative attempts to reestablish contact, which ultimately miss the point of no contact altogether. Regardless of how they handle it, this stage of longing is transformative. It strips away the layers of denial, frustration, and ego, leaving them with the raw reality of their emotions. They come face to face with the fact that your absence has created a void they can't easily fill. For some, this is a moment of reckoning, a chance to grow and evolve. For others, it's a painful reminder of what they've lost and a challenge they may not be ready to confront. The power of no contact becomes clear. It's not about punishing them or making them suffer. It's about creating space for both of you to reflect and grow. While they wrestle with their longing, you continue to move forward, focused on your own healing and self-discovery. Their journey through this stage is theirs alone, and it's not something you need to monitor or manage. It's a natural part of the process, one that reveals the depth of the impact you've had on their life. As the silence stretches on and the reality of no contact settles in, a profound shift occurs. Introspection begins. At first, they might have been consumed by shock, frustration, or longing, but as time passes and those feelings are processed, they are left with the undeniable need to look inward. This stage is characterized by a deeper examination of their own actions, choices, and the patterns that may have contributed to the current situation. It's not an easy process, but it's one that forces them to face truths they might have been avoiding. Introspection often begins subtly. It may come in fleeting moments of quiet when there are no distractions to shield them from their own thoughts. A seemingly insignificant memory might resurface, a conversation, an argument, or even a kind gesture from you that they overlooked at the time. These memories start to build a picture, one that becomes harder to ignore. The more they reflect, the clearer it becomes that the end of communication wasn't as abrupt as it might have seemed. Instead, it was the culmination of events, behaviors, and choices that had been building over time. This stage of introspection is deeply uncomfortable. It requires them to confront not only their actions but also their motivations. They may begin to question why they said the things they said, why they acted the way they acted, and why they failed to recognize the impact of their behavior sooner. It's a peeling back of layers, one by one, revealing the vulnerabilities and insecurities that may have driven their decisions. For someone who is unaccustomed to this level of self-awareness, it can feel overwhelming, even destabilizing. During this stage, they might start to see the ways in which they projected their own fears or flaws onto you. Perhaps they were quick to criticize or dismiss your feelings because it was easier than acknowledging their own shortcomings. Maybe they avoided difficult conversations, choosing instead to minimize the issues at hand or shift the blame onto you. Now, with no contact forcing them to sit with themselves, those patterns become glaringly obvious. They realize that the discomfort they feel isn't solely about your absence, it's about the parts of themselves they've tried to avoid facing. Introspection also brings with it a sense of accountability, though this varies from person to person. Some people might fully embrace this stage, using it as an opportunity for growth and change. They may recognize that their actions had consequences, that their words carried weight, and that their failure to nurture the relationship ultimately led to its breakdown. For these individuals, introspection becomes a catalyst for transformation. They begin to consider how they might approach relationships differently in the future, how they might communicate more effectively, and how they can take responsibility for their own healing. Not everyone handles introspection with grace or openness. For some, this stage can trigger defensiveness or denial. Instead of taking accountability, they may double down on their old narratives, convincing themselves that they were justified in their actions or that the fault lies solely with you. This resistance to self-reflection is often rooted in fear of change, fear of vulnerability, and fear of admitting they were wrong. For these individuals, introspection doesn't lead to growth, it becomes a painful reminder of the work they're unwilling to do. For those who do embrace introspection, this stage can be transformative. It pushes them to ask difficult questions. What do I need to change about myself? How can I be a better partner, friend, or person? Why did I let certain behaviors persist, and what can I learn from this experience? These questions don't have easy answers, but the very act of asking them is a step toward healing. It signifies a willingness to grow, to move beyond the patterns that contributed to the end of the relationship, and to approach future connections with greater mindfulness. This stage also brings a new understanding of boundaries. They begin to see your decision to go no contact not as an act of punishment, but as an act of self-preservation. They may realize that your silence wasn't meant to hurt them, but to protect your own well-being and to give both of you the space to reflect. This understanding can be humbling, as it forces them to acknowledge the ways in which they may have disregarded or disrespected your boundaries in the past. It's a lesson in respect, both for you and for themselves. Introspection is not a linear process. It's filled with moments of clarity followed by moments of doubt, progress followed by setbacks. There will be times when they feel a sense of hope, believing they've gained a new perspective and understanding, only to find themselves slipping back into old habits or thought patterns. But each step forward, no matter how small, is a step toward greater self-awareness. This stage is about confronting the truth. It's about recognizing that no contact isn't just about the absence of communication, it's about the presence of accountability, growth, and change. For those willing to embrace it, introspection becomes a powerful tool, one that can reshape their understanding of themselves and their relationships. It's not an easy journey, but it's a necessary one, and it lays the foundation for whatever comes next. The final stage in the journey of no contact is acceptance. It is the point where they finally come to terms with the reality of the situation, letting go of resistance, denial, and futile attempts to control what cannot be changed. This stage is not marked by a sudden epiphany, but rather a gradual understanding that the chapter has closed. It's a surrender to reality, an acknowledgement that no matter how much they might wish otherwise, things cannot return to the way they were. Acceptance often begins as a quiet realization. After the cycles of frustration, longing, introspection, and attempts to reconcile with their feelings, they start to see that clinging to the past is no longer serving them. The energy they once devoted to analyzing every detail, imagining different outcomes, or planning how to bridge the silence begins to diminish. They start to let go, not because they no longer care, but because they recognize that holding on is causing more harm than good. At this stage, they begin to see the situation with clearer eyes. They reflect on the entire journey, from the initial shock of no contact to the emotions they've navigated along the way. They realize that the space you created was not only necessary for you, but also for them. The silence has forced them to confront parts of themselves they may never have addressed otherwise. They might even come to understand that this process was a kind of gift, a hard but valuable lesson in self-awareness, respect, and growth. Acceptance is also about understanding the role they played in the relationship and its breakdown. It doesn't mean blaming themselves entirely or absolving you of your part. It's about recognizing the dynamics that existed and taking responsibility for their own actions, choices, and reactions. This stage often brings a sense of humility. They see their imperfections not as something to be ashamed of, but as opportunities for growth. The weight of regret starts to lift as they focus less on what they could have done differently and more on what they can do moving forward. This stage marks a shift from external focus to internal peace. They stop waiting for a response, an explanation, or a reconciliation. Instead, they turn their attention inward, focusing on their own healing and well-being. They begin to invest in themselves in ways they might have neglected during the relationship or in the earlier stages of no contact. Whether it's through pursuing personal goals, reconnecting with friends, or engaging in hobbies and activities that bring them joy, they start to rebuild their sense of self independent of the relationship. Acceptance doesn't erase the memories or the emotions tied to the relationship. Instead, it reshapes their understanding of them. They start to see the relationship not as a failure, but as an experience that taught them something valuable. They acknowledge the good moments and the lessons learned, even as they release the pain and attachment that kept them tethered to the past. The memories remain, but the sting of loss begins to fade, replaced by a sense of gratitude for what the relationship brought into their life. For some, this stage also brings a newfound respect for the boundaries set by no contact. They see it not as an act of punishment or rejection, but as a necessary step for both parties to grow and heal. This understanding allows them to approach the situation with more maturity, letting go of resentment or bitterness. They may even feel a sense of admiration for your strength in choosing what was best for you, recognizing that it takes courage to enforce boundaries in a way that prioritizes self-respect. Acceptance is not without its challenges. There are moments of doubt, moments when the longing resurfaces or the urge to reach out feels overwhelming. But these moments become less frequent and less intense over time. Each time they resist the pull to re-engage, they strengthen their resolve and move closer to true acceptance. It's a process of building emotional resilience, learning to sit with discomfort without acting on it, and finding peace in the present rather than chasing the past. As they settle into this stage, they begin to see the bigger picture. They understand that no contact wasn't just about the end of communication, it was about creating space for transformation. They see that the silence was a tool, one that forced them to confront their emotions, their actions, and their patterns. They recognize that this process has shaped them into a better version of themselves, even if it was painful along the way. Acceptance is ultimately about freedom. It's about releasing the need to control, the need to be right, and the need to hold on to something that no longer serves them. It's about finding peace within themselves, independent of external validation or resolution. They may not have all the answers and they may still carry a sense of loss, but they are no longer defined by it. They've learned to move forward, to focus on their own growth, and to trust that the journey ahead holds new opportunities and experiences. This stage is not an end, but a beginning. It marks the transition from being stuck in the past to embracing the present and looking toward the future. It's the point where they can finally breathe again, unburdened by the weight of what was. Acceptance doesn't erase the journey, they carry the lessons, the growth, and the understanding with them, but it allows them to step into the next phase of their life with clarity, strength, and hope.